Okay, let's pause a little bit at the point where we have prepared our environment and Terraform configuration, and let's just talk about Terraform only. So to be able to use Terraform effectively, we need to know some basics and to have some foundation that will allow us to easily write our configuration files and manage them, and to be able to understand these configuration files as well. This is why I will take a few minutes to talk about the basics of Terraform. And this is going to be multiple videos, so please bear with me before you actually get into any GCP stuff. I need to talk about the basics. And if you are not familiar with Terraform, this will be very critical for you to be able to go through the rest of the videos and to be able to depend on yourself later on when you want to apply it for a real life use case and for anything that you need to use for your work. Now, again, if you are familiar with Terraform and if you know it, but you just want to get to that GCP part, feel free to skip this whole section. This section, again, is just to be basics about Terraform. However, if you go through all of that while you are familiar with Terraform, then I would really love to hear your feedback on what I could do differently to make my knowledge transfer better and more effective, what I can explain in more detail, what should I probably just go through very quickly in terms of description and all. I mean, I would really love to get your feedback and how do you think I can make this better? Okay, so what am I going to talk about in this video? Basically, there are two main points that I want to cover. First of all, how the configuration files structured and process. And then I will talk about the 4 important commands that I will be heavily using in this series. This is not to say there are no other commands, but these are the most important commands that everybody will use. There will be some additional commands that we will get to know throughout the series. So let's jump into the first point, which is how the configuration files are structured and how things are processed in Terraform. Now, there are not many file types associated with Terraform. Obviously, there is the .tf, which is the configuration file where the stuff are stored there. There is also the .hcl file, and there is a tfvar file. You don't see that here yet. We will add it at some point. And there are other files such as, I think tf.json or some JSON format as well that is used by Terraform. Again, we'll get to see that in the future videos of this series. Now, you've already seen me creating the two .tf files here, provider.tf and backend.tf, and basically want to define my GCP provider, and the other is to define the backend that I want to use. Now, you can technically put everything in a single Terraform file or a single TF file. This will work, but this is really not a good idea. You should not be doing this at all. The best practice is to separate your environment and your configurations into separate files. This allows you to have a better ability to understand your configuration, and also it will allow you to easily manage the different components, the different parts of your configuration, right? Let's say you want to resize a disk for a VM in Compute Engine. You don't really have to go through a file with like 200 or 300 lines just to find that specific line where it contains the disk configuration, while you can much easily do it if you had that configuration for that disk separate in a dedicated file. Now, when you run Terraform, it will read all of the files that are included in the workspace. So again, that's the point. Or maybe you ask how Terraform will manage the multiple files if I separate my stuff in multiple files. Well, it does this by default, and it's made to do this. So once you run Terraform, It will check the whole directory that you're working in, read all of the files, consolidate them into, let's say, a logical list or something, or whatever that Terraform does, and then starts to logically go through the configuration to set up your execution plan, your execution order. So just to summarize this point, you can store your configuration in a single file, but the best practice is to split those into multiple files. And also when you run Terraform, you don't really care about execution order. I mean, you can put your configuration in a logical order. So when we want to provision a VM, we want to make sure that there is a VPC network available before it, right? So you can technically create the block for the VPC network above the block of the VM, but really this is not something you need to care about, because Terraform understands by itself that in order to create a VM, there must be a VPC existing before that. Even if you put the VM configuration before the block of the VPC, Terraform will still create the VPC before creating the VM. And this is something we will see clearly once we get to the GCP part again. Now let's move into the next point here, which is about the commands that we will be using very often with Terraform. Every time we want to use Terraform to apply or modify configuration, we will actually use these 4 commands above all other commands. But still there are other commands we will use from time to time. So I will go through these 4 commands in the order that we are supposed to go through when we are actually applying configurations and settings. So the first one here is Terraform init. And I think you've seen me doing Terraform init in the previous video. This command is going to initialize your project by installing the modules of the providers you are working with. And also it will initialize the state, and it will store the state information in the selected state. So when I do Terraform init here and when I press enter, you see it's going to initialize the backend, but also it will check if I don't have this providers folder there. And if it does not contain the Google provider, then it will download that for me and it will make it available so that it can be used whenever I apply any configuration. Now, if there is anything wrong in the state configuration as well, it will complain about it at this stage. Again, similar to what you've seen in the previous video when we had an issue with the format of the credentials file. Let me actually make one and let me run init again. And you'll see it's going to complain about the credentials file. It's unable to acquire that. So any issue with the state, it will give you an error here. Maybe also if I can change the bucket name, and you will see now it will throw an error because it cannot process the bucket name because it's not existing for it. Now the next command here is the Terraform plan. And the point about, let me just do the init again. The point about Terraform plan is like a dry run. Or maybe it's a simulation of what's going to happen if we actually apply the Terraform configuration. It will show you the proposed changes, what will be added or created, and what will be deleted, what will be left alone. This is what we will be using in order to validate our configuration and see what's going to change before we apply them. This is a very important command that you should always run before applying the configuration. I've come across one case where somebody mentioned to me that they created a configuration and then applied it for a Kubernetes cluster, a GKE cluster. But then when they went ahead and changed something in that configuration, it actually went ahead and deleted the whole cluster and recreated that from scratch, causing their work on that cluster to be removed or to be lost. Luckily, in that case, it was a GKE cluster, meaning they had the YAML files and stuff, and the Docker images were stored in artifact registry. So it did take them some time, but eventually they were able to redeploy everything again and got everything back up once more. So yeah, just make sure you read the Terraform plan and understand what's going to happen, and make sure that any resource that will be recreated or deleted is something you are fine with, or something will not affect your existing deployments and your existing work. Now, the third command here is terraform apply, which is obviously responsible for applying the configurations to our environment. And when you run terraform apply, it will also do terraform plan at the start and present you with the proposed changes, and then it will wait for your confirmation. So basically, the difference between terraform plan and terraform apply is they both do the plan and the proposed changes, but terraform apply will require your confirmation to go ahead with this plan. And it does that by asking you to type yes as a full word. It does not accept Y. It does not accept capital letter Y or anything. It wants you to type yes without any mistake, without any misspell. If you type the S before the E, or if you had a space at the end of yes, it will just not take that. It will cancel this. This is obviously a way to guarantee that you are paying attention and you are intending to actually apply these changes. It also acts some sort of a fail-safe measure, like an additional layer, because if you were not paying attention to the changes, and if it happens and you misspell the yes and the operation got cancelled and you run it again, maybe you will notice something wrong then in your plan, and you will say, yeah, I was lucky to not having that first time go through. So then you would go and fix the conflicts that you have. Now, the final command here that I want to show you is the terraform destroy. And from its name, this is for deleting or removing the configuration. This is one of the greatest benefits of Terraform, honestly. You can provision a complete infrastructure in one command. Then in another simple command, you can remove that whole infrastructure again without any effort. Imagine how much time you can save in testing scenarios and environments where you are actually required to deploy and delete such configurations. Now, I don't need to mention that this is a very critical command, and you need to be sure that you're going to destroy the environment when you actually invoke it, right? When you run it, it will also do, this is better, it will also do a Terraform plan, then present you with the changes, that is the resources that are going to be deleted. And then once you explicitly type yes, it will delete the resources. Now, there is another way of deleting specific resource and configuration from your configuration files rather than just deleting the whole environment. Let's say you have a configuration, but there is a VM you don't like anymore. Instead of just deleting the whole configuration just for the sake of that VM, maybe you had other VMs, or maybe you had other network load balancers and stuff like that. Instead of deleting all of that, you can just delete the VM by itself with Terraform destroy. This is something I will show you, and I will come along in the next video, which is related on how to refer to individual resources, how to call these individual resources that are defined in your Terraform configuration files. Okay, I think this is enough for this video. It's been more than 15 minutes, and I just wanted to bring up these important commands that I will be using, and also make sure you are aware of how Terraform works and how it handles the files and folders in your workspace, in case you were not aware of that behavior before. And as I just mentioned, the next video will be about more basics in Terraform. This time I will talk about how to name resources and what are the best practices for naming resources, and how to refer to them later on when you need to work with a specific individual resource.